Let's go to Micah 6 and 8. I taught from Micah 6 and 8 a few weeks ago, okay? And when I taught from Micah 6 and 8, we looked at the last part of it about walking with the Lord. And we're going to unpack another part of this, at least for tonight and next week, at least for the next 2 weeks. Micah 6 and 8, and it says, he has shown thee, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. That verse from the New Living Translation says, know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good. There's a response to, they're basically saying, what does God want from us? You want to sacrifice our children? They knew God didn't want us to. You want us to have our blood? You want all our blood? That they were being facetious. They said, no, God's told you what he wants. God's told you what is good. This is what he requires. Everybody say requires. Requires. This is not a preference. This is what God requires. Number one, to do what is right. Or the King James says to do justly. To love mercy. Number two, and third, to walk humbly with your God. So Micah 6 and 8, it gives 3 commands that are inseparable. Justice, mercy, and humility. Justice, what we do. Mercy, what we value. And humility is how we operate and walk through life. And I want to speak tonight from the subject, doing justice. Everybody say doing justice. Okay? It had been noted, and in case it was brought to my attention, and I didn't deny it, and several people have noticed, and some y'all, well, I don't know how you evaluate it, but it was observed that it seemed like over the last several years, my preaching and teaching somewhat has changed in terms of some things that I talk about and emphasize and all that. And can I tell you, this world has changed over the last several years. This nation has changed drastically. And so my goal in why I address current events, governmental issues, societal issues, is so we can have a biblical response to what's going on. Okay? I learned a new phrase when I came to South Carolina, and that was people saying stuff like, made me feel some kind of way. And y'all ever felt some kind of way? And I didn't know exactly what some kind of way meant. And some kind of way means I got a whole bunch of emotion going on here. I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm aggravated, I'm ticked off. You're feeling some kind of way. And sometimes when things are happening, we're feeling some kind of way and we don't know exactly how we're supposed to feel. We're feeling some kind of way and we don't know how we're supposed to respond. And so I am being deliberate and intentional to address things that are going on from a biblical perspective and give you a biblical paradigm and a biblical lens how to filter through these things. Are y'all with me here? And so over the last several years, particularly over the last 10 years, we've heard a lot about justice, okay? And so, but I want to look at justice from a biblical perspective because the Hebrew word for justice, it really means to act justly. That's why it says in Micah 6 and 8, what does the Lord require of you but to do what is right or to act justly, to do justly. Everybody say do. He wants you to do justly. So justice is not merely something we feel or think or aspire to or espouse or value. Justice is something we do. Are y'all with me here? Just like you've heard me teach over the years that love is not merely a feeling. The Bible never talks about love as a feeling. The Bible talks about love as an action. Husbands, love your wives. He's not saying feel real mushy about them all the time. And he says, love your wives. He means, and then he tells us, what was proof that he's talking about action. He said, as Christ loved the church. And then he explains us how Christ loved the church. What did Christ do? He gave himself for the church and he sacrificed. So love is always an action. I want you to understand that justice is action. Justice is action. And the Hebrew word is mishpat, M-I-S-H-P-A-T, mishpat. And it carries the meaning of righteous action, legal fairness, and the active defense of the vulnerable, or what Jesus called the least of these. What you do unto the least of these, you've done unto me. It's a verb of doing. Justice is a verb of doing, not a noun of feeling. In the biblical sense, it's behavioral and active, not passive or merely emotional. Justice is not a belief we hold, it's a behavior we should be practicing. Let me say that again. Justice is not merely a belief we hold, it's a behavior we should be practicing. And in view of the current climate in our government and in the world, I think it's more important than ever for Christians and the church to do justice. To do justice. So when you can't count on the government, or if people don't empathize or sympathize with needs, the church still needs to be empathetic. When no one else thinks things are important, the church still has to be there to value people and show people dignity. Regardless of laws and regardless of politics, the church is still supposed to be the church. Y'all with me? So that means justice in the Bible, or what I'm saying, biblical justice, is not merely a philosophy or ideology. It's a way of life expressed through actions. Justice is not a racial issue. It's not a political issue. It's not a generational issue, like, young people concerned about justice. No. It's not a generational issue. Justice is a biblical humanitarian issue. A biblical humanitarian issue. We should do justice because people are valued. We do justice because it's humane to be just. Are y'all with me? So justice is action, not merely conviction, just like tithing. Over the years, I've met these people. Some of these people may be here tonight, but there's usually more of them here on Sunday, who believe in tithing, but don't tithe. Y'all ain't here tonight, right? Because the tithe has come on Wednesday. But these people say, I believe in tithing. I believe in tithing. What's the proof you believe in tithing? You tithe. Okay, so when you think of tithing, think of action. Think of giving. Think of generosity. So just like tithing, justice can't be something that you believe in. It got to be something you do. It got to be something that you practice. Biblical justice, it requires action, fairness, fair treatment, integrity, protection of the vulnerable, or Jesus calls them the least of these, and honest dealings. How you deal with your finances, how you deal with as justice has to do with you as a supervisor, how you treat people under you. Justice has to do with how you wield your power and your influence. Justice has to do whether you would take advantage of people simply because you're in a position of power or influence. And Scripture repeatedly emphasizes doing justice. So it's something we do, not we think, we feel, or petition others to do. It's something that every Christian should do justice. Justice should be an issue for every Christian when it comes to how people are treated. This is not a left thing or right thing. It's not a white thing or black thing. It's a human thing, and it's a God thing to be just. Are y'all with me? Isaiah 1:17 Another place where it mentions justice, it says, learn to do good, seek justice. Go after it. Rebuke the oppressor. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow. Y'all remember when Moses fled from Egypt? Why did he flee from Egypt? Because he saw one of his fellow Egyptians, rather fellow Israelites, fellow Hebrews being mistreated. Am I right? And he jumped in to do something about it. He was doing justice. Now, he took his justice too far because he ended up killing a man. But he said, I cannot just stand here and see you abusing this man and do nothing. Justice makes you respond when you see wrong, no matter who does it. Are y'all with me? Okay? So he says, learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. So many times when you see justice in the scriptures, you're going to see it associated with treatment for oppressed people, for the fatherless, okay? Children, and in the scriptures, reason why fatherlessness was such a big thing, because in the scripture, and I still believe this, men provided for children. Men took care of families. So if one was fatherless, that usually meant he was in poverty. So when he says the fatherless, he's talking about children who don't have anybody protecting them and taking care of them. And children do nothing wrong. I don't care if the mother slept with 10 men in one night and don't know who the father is. The child did nothing wrong. Are y'all with me here? Yeah, we were sitting down talking to somebody one time, and we were talking about the fact of people falling through the cracks and whatever. And I'll never forget the person said, "Well, they shouldn't be having all these babies." I agree, but they got them. They shouldn't be having. No, they shouldn't be having all these. No, they shouldn't. So you're gonna punish children because mothers shouldn't have babies? You can't be a person of justice and have that kind of attitude as a Christian. Justice has nothing to do with judging whether people are right or wrong. One of the impetus for this, for me, in this thinking, is that, I'll be honest with y'all, I really thought that the church, regardless of color, was the church. And we all love people, and we all care about everybody, and we're going to stand for what's right, because right is right and wrong is wrong. And George Floyd came along, and I saw folks say stuff like, well, you know, he wasn't a good person. Did you, any of y'all hear people say that kind of stuff? In other words, I know that it's all right to put your knee on his neck and kill him because he wasn't a good person. You got to earn getting your next breath. And church people were saying that kind of stuff. Christians were saying that kind of stuff. And I started realizing that if we don't care for people, who will? Let me go deeper. And if we don't care for our own, who will? Now, I know y'all got a problem with that, so I got to go word on you. Jesus came to his own, and his own received him not. Paul was called to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. That was his assignment. But no, Paul says, my heart is that Israel might be saved. It is nothing wrong with, okay, let me break it a little closer. If a man doesn't provide for his own, he's worse than an infidel. And you shall be witnesses unto me, both in Jerusalem and Judea and then the uttermost parts of the world. Okay? What do I look like making sure all y'all eat and my family don't eat? That sounds real nice, but I got to start with my own. Especially if other folks ain't concerned about my own. I got to be concerned about them. So issues of justice, but it's not limited to that. Okay? Zechariah 7:9. Okay, we saw the fatherless. The Bible talks about widows. When you see justice, you're going to see about widows. Why was it the case with widows? Widows, again, men provided for the women provided for the children. If there was a widow, that usually meant a husband, her husband was dead, had passed away, and they didn't have New York Life and Mutual Omaha, okay, and leave nice insurance policies. So then it fell the lot of the son, usually the oldest son, to try to provide for the mother. But some cases, the mother didn't have children. And then God had a structure that the kinsman redeemer, a next kin, would either marry her or take care of her. Okay? Because widows, again, was associated with poverty. So when the Bible talks about you cannot be a person of justice and not have a concern about poverty. I hate poverty. Have any of y'all ever heard me say that before? I hate poverty and all its effects on every level. That's why, like God, I wish that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. I believe that God can cause all grace to abound towards you, that you should be, that you have all sufficiency in everything and require no aid or support. I believe if people tithe and give and live right, all your needs can be met. Okay? But if I see somebody on the street and I see him going through the trash and need some food, should I go to him and say, listen, you need to tithe? If you was a tithe and giver, you wouldn't be in this situation. And that's the kind of attitude that a lot of, quote unquote, the church has. People got to qualify and deserve justice. And it's not biblical. Zechariah 7:9, thus says the Lord of hosts, execute. So now we see execute justice. Execute true justice, show mercy and compassion, everyone to his brother. That verse from New Living Translation says, this is what the Lord of heaven's army says, judge fairly, show mercy and kindness to one another. Okay? I'll see if I'm going through this too quick. I left out something here. It's action, not merely conviction. Action, fairness, integrity, protection, honest dealings. Doing justice. Seeking justice. Pleading for the rights of others. Executing true justice. Showing mercy and compassion. And justice is rooted in two things: loving God and loving people. That's what causes you to be a just person. You love God and you love people. Justice is also, that's why I'm looking back. I thought I had some notes about that, but I can just talk about it. Justice is also displayed by what you support, who you support, what you help fund, how you spend your money. That's why some of y'all are too young to remember. You've heard about it, and I've been there, and even when we were there, we were there 14 years ago in South Africa. The remnants of apartheid is still there. Okay? Churches still, for the most part, are Afrikaan, which is the white South Africans, colored, which is light-skinned black people, and Zulu, black people. Okay? That's still the case. I went in one place, and our hosts, for the most part, our hosts were, and they're trying to get away from these terms, but it's the language rolling over from apartheid of using terms like colored. Okay? My grandmother was proud to be colored. My mother, you could not tell my grandmother she was black. I ain't black. Do I look black to you? I'm colored. I said, Nana, what color are you? Purple, green, red? My grandmother was colored. And so, so I remember, I don't know if you remember, Sonny, we were in the mall, and I walked into this jewelry store. And the guy was with us, and he was walking with us, and he stayed outside. And I came out, he said, we don't go in there. When I asked him why, he started giving me the history, particularly of diamonds in South Africa, and how black people were oppressed and taken advantage of through the diamond industry. Y'all with me here? And I'm just going in there, look like good diamond to me. And his mind, to do justice, is not to support that industry here. So all this boycotting, that justice got something to do with that. This show's getting ready to come here. I've always wanted to go, and now we know we ain't going. That's Shun Yi. Y'all know what I'm talking about, the Chinese, okay? And it looks like a wonderful show, and we always wanted to go, my wife and I, until we saw last month on 60 Minutes. Until we saw these young people who were brought over here from China, these kids and teenagers, they're kept at a compound in hundreds of acres, a compound in rural northern New York State that they didn't even allow the press to come in there. They came outside the compound to talk to them. But these young people they're treated like servants, almost like slaves. Okay? They make them, they don't give them medical care. They force them to do this dancing and all this kind of stuff. Their families look at it as a privilege. They send their kids there so they can get money for the impoverished in China. And so a couple of them got out telling the real deal of how all this comes about. So I can't look at that the same. I can't support that because that would not be justice. So how you spend your money are issues of justice. Now, some things you don't know, but once you know, you know. Years ago, my former friend, and the only reason why he's a former friend because he cut me off. I had y'all. Some of y'all heard me say, and some of y'all been here long enough to know I had a really close friend, and we were friends since kids. And he ghosted me. When I say ghosted me, I mean ghosted me. Don't take calls, because I confronted him one time about his lifestyle, and that was it. Pastor Marston told me, stop trying to be everybody's bishop. Leave these people alone. I confronted him about a lifestyle. He cut me off. We even saw him on a plane one time. We're sitting in first class. He came through in Charlotte, and we said, hey, and he kept on. He did like this here and kept on moving. Then we waited around for him. We didn't even see him. But anyway, he came down here. I brought it. He was preaching for us many years ago. And so he kept saying, I heard about this place called Maurice's. He said, the people said, when you go to Columbia, you got to get some Maurice's barbecue. Okay, how many of y'all know about Maurice's? Some of you don't. Ask somebody before you go. Do justly. Okay? And I told him, I said, listen, I ain't taking you to Maurice's. We don't go to Maurice's. He said, what are you talking about? At that time, they had the Confederate flag over, and it was rooted in racism and all that. I said, we don't go to Maurice's. He said, listen, I don't live here. That ain't my issue. And when you looked at certain things that are wrong, that's not your issue, you are turning a blinded eye to wrong. Once you know, you know. Y'all with me? So justice is action, not merely conviction, all right? Where was I here? I was saying justice is rooted in two things. And those are what? Loving God and loving people. And those go together. If you really love God, the love of God constrains you to love people. And you can't really love people unless you love God. Any of y'all find that out? Some people are hard to get along with. Some people seem unlovable. You need the love of God that will constrain you to love people. Just rooted in two things, loving God and loving people. Look at 1 John. 1 John 4. Verse 20 and 21. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a what? He's a fabricator. Fabricator sounds so much better, don't it? Well, the Bible don't call you no fabricator. What call you? The Bible say you're a liar. Now, when I was coming up, we couldn't even say liar. To say lie in my house was like a cuss word. I'd get popped in the mouth for saying liar or lie. I didn't do that. He telling a story. We can say he's telling a story. We can say God said, no, you ain't no storyteller. You a liar. Say, I love God, but hate his brother. He's a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? I said, that doesn't even make sense. And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God, didn't say should, what's the next word? Must love his brother also. So God says, the proof that you love me is loving people. He that loves God must love his brother also. And if we're going to be people of justice and promote justice and do justly, we got to love God and we got to love people. So justice is rooted in two things, loving God and loving people. Conversely, injustice is rooted in two things. And that's no fear of God and no care for people. The reason why people can be unjust or unjust is because they don't fear God and they don't care for people. And let me also tell you this. The love of God, you can love your people and not love people. The love of God is for all of humanity. And so you can't just get into the thing, well, I just love those who love me. No fear of God and no care for people. The love of God causes you to be empathetic. Empathetic is compassion displayed. And it causes you to be compassionate. Love in action. Look at Luke 18. The context, Jesus is giving the principle about the power of persistent prayer, to not give up and pray and be persistent in prayer. But in giving the example of why we should, we learn some things about justice. Luke 18, starting verse 2, he says, first verse, men ought always pray and not faint. Then he goes on to say, there was in a certain city a judge. Look at the characteristics of this judge, who did not fear God nor regard man. Okay? This man, he didn't give a hoot about God and didn't give a hoot about people. He said, I could care less about God and I could care less about people. I told you my uncle who first challenged me, and it wasn't. I didn't have to go home and pray about it. It came up in my spirit, and it gave me resolve when I was 25 years old, and I've had that same resolve ever since. When he found out I was teaching Bible study at the AME Zion Church on Wednesday night, that had nothing to do with him, nothing to do with his job. He said, "I hear you up there teaching Bible study at that black church." There's one black church in town. And I said, yeah. He said, "Well, if you got time to go to church on Wednesday night, you can be here in this office on Wednesday night." I said, "No, that was never the plan. That was never," we said. He said, "Well, I need you." I said, "Well, I'm not going to be here." He said, "What are your priorities?" And I didn't even have to think about it. I said, "My priorities are God, my family, and then a job." And he looked at me, and I know this was the devil speaking through him. He said to me, "You better put your job first, your family second, and let God fall where he may." And that's when I said, he said, "Well, if you're not in here, you're fired." I said, "No, you're not firing me, I'm quitting." He said, "You're fired." I said, "I quit." He said, "You fired." I said, "I quit." Okay. He's dead now, and I'm still saying I quit, and he can't rebuttal. But it challenged me. What are my priorities? And that's why I tell people, really, I never met. I'm sure there are people I personally had never met anybody like that. He literally, to this day, I say, was the worst person I ever met in my life. And so every time I read the scripture about the unjust judge, it makes me think about him. Who didn't fear God, didn't regard man. He would say, just lie to somebody, when executive recruiting, just get them to take the job. By the time they find out that what you told them about that company ain't true, we will have moved on to the next one. That was his attitude. No fear of God, no regard for man. And when you have no fear of God or no regard for man, you will oppress people. You'll mistreat people. You'll take advantage of people. It said, now, there was a widow in that city, and she came to this unjust judge, or excuse me, to the judge. We don't know he's unjust yet. We just know that he's a man, he's a judge who doesn't fear God, no regard of man. And this woman came, and she says, this widow implies poverty. Widow implies I'm fighting for myself. The woman comes and said, get justice for me from my adversary. I need somebody to make this right. Make them treat me. Someone has stolen something from her. Someone had owed her something. Someone had mistreated her. Someone had abused her, impressed her in some kind of way. And she's coming to the justice system for judgment and justice. And she comes before a system that says, I don't care about your problem. Get justice for me. And it says, while he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, even though he acknowledged in himself, I do not fear God, nor do I regard man, yet because this widow what troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continually coming she weary me. She keeps coming, and I wasn't planning on saying this, and sometimes, y'all realize, y'all know what protest is? Protest is aggravating people. Some changes have, historically, the civil rights and all that was people aggravating people. When you call your politicians or you call your senators, those calls start being aggravating to them. This man didn't do anything because he cared anything about her. He said, but because she keeps coming, she's aggravating me. She's troubling me. I'm going to avenge her, lest by her continue coming she weary me. And then Jesus says here, then the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said. He was what kind of judge? What made him unjust? Didn't care about God, didn't care about people. When you have judges and people in positions of power who don't honor God and don't care about people, you're not going to get justice from them. Hear what the unjust judge said. And shall God not avenge his own elect, which cry out day and night, though he bears along with them? Let me give you another point. Even if there's an unjust system, even if there's unjust judges, we can still cry out to God. We can still cry out. So watch this. It wasn't his compassion that caused him to remedy her situation and give her her rights and give her justice. It was her persistence, and God basically moved on his heart. And so you got to remember, take your eyes off of man, because ultimately we serve the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He's the King, he's the lawgiver, he's our judge, and he will save us. So that just because there seems to be unjust judges or system that seems to be working against you, it doesn't mean that you can't get justice if you cry out to God. I'll put down one, I'll raise up another. The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord. He turns it as the rivers of water. Amen? That verse, Luke 18:2 from the New Living Translation, says that there was a judge in the city, and he said, who neither feared God nor cared about people. Didn't fear God, didn't care about people. And if you don't fear God and don't care for people, there'll be no justice. And somebody said, no peace. So let's keep unpacking this. Justice, it begins with integrity. Justice begins with integrity. Integrity means being a person of character who has a commitment to do the right thing. There was a prophet by the name of Spike Lee. He told us many years ago to do what? Just do the right thing. Y'all know, it's some, I don't know what I should do. Sometimes the answer is just do the right thing. I know what you feel like doing. I know what they deserve. But just do the right thing. And if you fear God, you do the right thing. So justice begins with integrity, personal character. Personal integrity, honest dealings, and self-accountability are the starting point of all outward justice. In other words, you can't do justice out there if you're not living it in here. Let me say it again. You can't do justice out there if you're not living in it. In other words, it has to be a personal thing with you. I'm not going to mistreat people. As expressing, I'm going to do right by people. I'm going to do the right thing. And Christians do justice when we treat people fairly, when we keep our word, when you tell the truth, when you refuse corruption or to get involved in something, some underhanded deal that's going to take advantage of people or deceive people just because you're going to make money from it. Refusing corruption, not cheating people, even in spades. I don't know. I just added that. Can you cheat people in spades? You can cheat? Well, yeah, see. You shouldn't cheat in spades either. And not taking advantage of people. I'll be honest with you. It's amazed me when I see people taking advantage of people. Especially in the church. I established real early in this church, and as far as I know, it's not an issue at this point in our church. And if it is, you let them know that before I have to say anything to them, that we don't do that here. And that is just coming to church trying to get people to be part of your downline. trying to get network in the church because this looked like you got a captive audience to create your downline in your network marketing business. You'd be surprised people who come to a church just for their own purposes. You got some men who think I'll come to a church because a lot of fine single women who are thirsty. Oh, that's in the Bible. And he calls them silly women. Okay? So anytime you see people just trying to take advantage of people, I'm trying not to say it, but I'm saying, you got preachers who just take advantage of people. Link prophecy with $1,000. Because I gave you a word, you're supposed to give $1,000. That's manipulation. That's taking advantage of people. And it's statistically proven, sometimes the people most desperate are the people who are going to give the most. And the people know that and will try to take advantage of people. And as a Christian doing justice, we shouldn't have anything to do with any of that. I'm just going to tell y'all, I don't do it here, but y'all need to know it. I don't mention people by name, but I'll address issues. There's services you can go to where the pastor has asked the preacher to take up a special offering, and the deal is he'll get 50% or 70% of all that he raises. That stuff's common in churches. I don't deal with that. I've had people over the years who I canceled. And the reason why I canceled them, because they would only come if they could only receive their own offering with their own envelopes. That's a common thing. And all that's taking advantage of people. Nobody talks about this stuff. But all that's manipulation. And listen, and when I'm doing life with you, I can't afford to be running gimmick. Because you're going to find it out soon. And I'm going to be left trying to pay off $12 million by myself. Proverbs 11:1. We'll get that reel ready. I didn't get a chance to show it in noon, but I think I can show it here. Proverbs 11:1, God warned his people about dishonest scales, or what was called in traditional a false balance. Okay, y'all don't know nothing about it, but when I was a little boy, before we moved to projects, we lived in a neighborhood right there. It was Jackson Avenue, Jersey City. Now it's Martin Luther King Drive. But within one block, we had like a delicatessen and a butcher and a fruit market and vegetable and all that was like in one place. And so my mother would go and say, "Go get me a pound of such and such." Okay. Get me a half a pound of this, or you get vegetables, and they would have a scale. And the price was based upon, y'all with me here? Based upon the scale. Well, in the Bible, they would weigh it. You know, you say it was 10 cents a pound, 5 cents an ounce, whatever. And so God said, don't use dishonest scales, trying to get more money from people. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord. Said, but a just weight is his delight. Said, stop trying to get over on people. That's not justice. Okay? So in ancient markets, merchants used scales, and some would cheat the customers with dishonest weights. So justice also means being honest in your business dealings. Elder Pat, I don't know if you remember that. You remember that first building? It was down the street here. We were right after we started. We were getting ready to buy that building. You remember that? Yeah, down here. It's Now it's an international, some kind of international church. Well, we can buy that building. Well, there was a preacher who was coming around our church, and we don't have a building. And he said, I wasn't bishop then. He said, Pastor, the Lord told me to help you get a building. And so he brought us, and we were looking at buying this building, and I had never bought a building before. I didn't own a house yet, so a whole lot I didn't know. Now I understand things like surveys and inspections, all that kind of. I had never, and so we get ready to buy the building, and then something happened. Something happened. It wasn't going right, and I backed away from the deal. And then the preacher who said he was helping me, he said, Pastor, I'm glad you backed out of it. He said, the truth of the matter is he doesn't own the building, and I was trying to get you to sublease it from him. Now, it would have come out when I got an attorney. He was going to try to have an attorney. When I got an attorney to do a survey on it or to do a title check, who owned the building. But the Spirit of the Lord convicted him, and he finally tells me that this deal that he was bringing to me really wasn't a deal, because I would not have been buying the building because he didn't even own the building. That amazes me. The stuff that people will do and call themselves Christians just to make a buck. And so you got to justice is being honest to people in your business dealings, not taking advantage of people. Okay. Do you have that reel ready? You asked for 2 minutes. I gave you 2 minutes. Look at Luke 6:31. Jesus says, we call this the golden rule. Just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. Isn't that simple enough? He said, don't do anything to anybody you wouldn't want to do to you. Because my mom used to say, what goes around comes around. And the scripture said, you're going to reap what you sow. Don't treat anybody the way you wouldn't want to be treated. Just as you want men to do to you, you do likewise to them. So justice also is seen in things like paying people fairly, honoring contracts. Okay? Here's an old story that you had to be a really, really long time to know this one. I hadn't told this one in a long time. So when we started the church, this company came to me, and they wanted to make me I was on the radio, and they wanted to make me a jingle. Okay? Haven't you heard this story? Okay. They wanted to make me a jingle to go with our radio program. And so it was like $5,000, and you gave them half up front, and then they come back with the jingle, and then they come back with the rest or whatever. And so and the contract said they had complete creative authority over it and all that. And I still remember the jingle. Right Direction Christian Center will help you fulfill your dreams. Education, prosperity, faith and spiritual self-esteem, unconditional love. God has given us authority from above. Right Direction Christian Center, this is the way. And this man played. I said, no. I said, I can't. He said, listen, we have completed the. I said, no, I'm not paying for that. And he showed me the contract. He showed me in the contract that this is what you said. I said, you asked me what kind of music. At that time, Kirk Franklin had just come out and Fred Hammond. I said, this the kind of, this something like this. Not this is the way. And I'll never forget, young man, a white young man, his name is Brendan. I tried to bring him here years ago. He was going to be our first youth pastor. And back then, we're talking in the late 90s, the government wouldn't let me bring him here through immigration laws because they looked at the type of position. They said you should be able to get a youth pastor here in the United States rather than bringing somebody here. So that was going to be a problem. Anyway, and I'll never forget, and I was telling him about, I was so mad, and he said, let me send you this article that Kenneth Copeland wrote. And I don't want to read no article. But he sent me an article, and the article, and I still teach this principle this day about staying out of strife. How strife will hinder the blessings of God in your life. How strife will block your money. And so the Lord convicted me, and I went on and paid them the rest of that money, and I never used the jingle because I signed the contract. Now, I should have known, I should have looked at it more closely, but I signed the contract. Another time, when we bought our first building over in St. Andrews Road there, we had a 3-year lease. And here we are we're barely going into the 2nd year, and we're busting at the seams. We got to move, and I talked to the people. They wouldn't let me out the lease. They said, you signed the lease here. We're not letting you out of it. And so for a year and a half, after we moved out of that building, I still paid back $2,000 every month for a year and a half because I signed the contract. And God has blessed us. Never missed a beat, never struggled, because I decide I'm going to do justly. If I say something, I got to do it. God, I didn't always live like that. I was like, if you don't ask, don't tell. Okay, if I can get away with it, if they ain't asking. You know, I had a situation recently with a tenant, and he kept giving me reasons why I wasn't paying. And so as we came into this month, it was going to be 3 months. So on the last day of the last month, I sent him, what was that, Friday? When was it? Saturday? When was the last day? Saturday. So I sent him an email and a text, said, this is official notice. As of tomorrow, you'll be 3 months. This is your official notice for 30 days to be out. When I woke up in the morning, I had my money. What does that tell you? Come on, what does that tell you? He had the money. When you see people do that kind of stuff, they are not people of integrity. Then you're supposed to have it next month by the 5th of the month. I got my money today. Y'all may think that's little stuff, but if you want God to bless you financially, you got to be just in your business dealings. It's one thing to not be able to pay. It's another thing to not pay because you're not a person of integrity. And let me tell you, when I see people like that, I back away. Stay over there. Because I can't remember, I was telling someone this week, I was telling my cousin. I was telling my cousin who was here, and she has a daycare center. She's done extremely well. And so, but she's still doing work. She has a couple daycare center. And she would tell me about this particular employee. She says, every time I'm gone, she don't show up to work. I said, you can't keep dealing with that. I said, you can manage performance. You can't manage people's integrity. See, because integrity is who you are. And I ain't with you all the time. I can manage your performance, say this is do it this way, but I can't manage what you're going to do. I fired an employee one time years ago here at the church because they had an accident with the church van. Now, as far as I can't remember if there was any damage on the church van. I don't think anybody looked at that closely. They had an accident with it, but a couple months later, we got suit papers. And the reason why we got suit papers a couple months later is because she never told us she had an accident. And she tried to handle it herself. He tried to handle it herself, and that's what we got insurance for. Stuff happens. She didn't get fired because she had an accident. She got fired because she has no character. Oh, y'all didn't know the church fired people? Some of you are shocked. No, I can't manage poor character. What else are you doing that you're not telling me about? That could have really been bad. So paying people fairly, honoring contracts, paying your debts, not manipulating other people, and not abusing others if you have positions of power. All this is part of justice. So before we start talking about the government, no justice, no peace, pay your bills. Honor your word, and God will bless you. When I saw in the scriptures, and we did a conference years ago called Life After Debt, and I taught these principles. As a matter of fact, Sister Gladney, that's how I met her, who's still a member of our church, she came to that conference, told me how that conference blessed her so much. I can't remember, I gave all these principles about how to get out of debt and supernatural debt cancellation. And she came and brought me, I never got it printed, but she came and brought me a whole manuscript from that message. But one of the things I pointed out in the scriptures is that the Bible talks about the man who owed money, and he says, he goes to the person he owes the money, he says, have mercy on me, and I'll pay you all. And because he said that, the man canceled the debt. And I use that as a principle that once you make up your mind, you will pay. Now you get God involved. That's one thing. When I started doing that and I wanted God to bless me financially, this is when stuff was messed up. I went back, y'all, I ain't telling y'all you got to do this, so don't get convicted by this. I found judgments that I hadn't paid them. I found charge-offs and went back and paid them. There was a dentist, who was that? That was a pediatrician, Dr. French? What was that, pediatrician or dentist? Huh? A pediatric dentist. Yeah. And I owed that doctor money. And years later, I found that bill. I called him up. They said, who? Mr. Bailey? Because I had ducked them years ago. And I said, listen, I need to settle this and pay this. They said, oh, Mr. Bailey, that don't even worry about it. We wrote that off years ago. You wrote it off, but I didn't write it off. And I'm telling you, when I started doing that, man, God started blessing me, opening up doors, money came, I unclogged the flow. Some of y'all, you got your flow clogged up because you're not handling your money in a just way. Make up your mind you're going to pay your bills, you're going to keep your word, you're going to treat people right, and that includes creditors. Now, you know, when we had I'm done here. When we had the economic crisis of 2008 and the home crisis and all that, everybody wanted to get out of the mortgage because they said, I didn't know what kind of mortgage I had. I know what kind of, everybody blame all the mortgage companies. Some folks knew what kind of mortgage they had. Okay, everybody was claiming, I didn't know what kind of mortgage. No, some people knew what kind of mortgage they had. They knew it wasn't a fixed rate. They knew it was going to go up in 5 years. Okay, but now it was that situation that they didn't want to pay it, and so. But there were people who just tried to get out of things. There were people who sat in houses and squatted in houses, didn't pay because nobody was saying anything. You can't do that kind of stuff and expect God to bless you financially. Amen? Do unto others you have them do to you. I came across this reel here. Look at this, y'all. This person getting over at the airport. That ain't it. That is not it. That ain't it. Here you go. Okay. I don't know. That wasn't it, but I don't know if y'all. So you know, you go to the airport and they weigh your luggage. So when the person was looking, the person was lifting the luggage up with her foot. Because for those who don't travel, if you're over 50 pounds, you have to pay extra for your luggage. So as they're weighing it, as they were looking at it, she was lifting the luggage up with her foot. That's the opposite of a false scale. That's a false person on the scale. Okay? And that might seem like a little thing, and it might look funny, but you do stuff like that, you clog up the flow. What's this exciting lesson tonight? Come on, let's stand.